You tell yourself you want to change, but every evening you recognize the same patterns playing out, the same behaviors cycling through, the same internal conversations repeating as if nothing you decided in the morning ever mattered. You are not failing because you lack motivation. You are failing because you are trying to transform your life while leaving the unconscious untouched. Carl Jung understood that real transformation does not come from adding new habits or forcing yourself into disciplines that contradict who you actually are beneath the performance. It comes from attending to the specific psychological territories where your shadow operates, where your projections distort reality, where your fragmentation costs you everything without you ever noticing the price. There are 5 areas of daily attention that determine whether you individuate or whether you remain a stranger to yourself. These are not productivity hacks. They are not optimization strategies. They are the psychological foundations that either support your transformation or quietly sabotage it every single day. And most people ignore all 5 because they have been taught to focus outward, to measure progress through external achievement, to believe that change happens somewhere other than in the hidden places where you actually live. The first thing you must improve daily is your relationship to silence, not meditation, not mindfulness as a technique, but your capacity to exist without constant stimulation, without the need to fill every gap in your awareness with noise, with input, with distraction. Jung saw that the modern person is terrified of silence because silence reveals what you have been avoiding. It strips away the persona, the roles, the narratives you use to convince yourself and others that you are in control. In silence, the shadow speaks. The parts of yourself you have disowned begin to surface. The anger you have been sublimating, the grief you have been postponing, the fear you have been covering with busyness. Most people cannot sit in silence for 10 minutes without reaching for their phone, without creating a task, without finding something to fix or solve or consume. This is not a time management problem. It is a psychological defense. You are avoiding the encounter with yourself because you have been conditioned to believe that your internal world is either empty or dangerous. But the unconscious is neither. It is simply unintegrated. And until you create daily space for it to emerge, until you stop flooding your awareness with external content, you will remain fragmented. You will remain reactive. You will remain controlled by forces you refuse to acknowledge. Improving your relationship to silence means choosing, every single day, to sit with what is present without trying to change it, without judging it, without immediately turning it into a problem that needs solving. You learn that discomfort is not an emergency, that boredom is not a failure, that the absence of stimulation does not mean the absence of meaning. And slowly, through this practice, you begin to hear what your psyche has been trying to tell you. You begin to see the patterns you have been enacting unconsciously. You begin to reclaim the attention you have been giving away to anything that keeps you from facing yourself. The second thing you must improve daily is your awareness of projection. Jung taught that we do not see the world as it is. We see it through the lens of our unresolved psychological material. When you are unconscious of your own shadow, you project it onto others. You see in them what you refuse to see in yourself. You become critical, judgmental, reactive, not because of who they are, but because of what they represent in your own psyche. And this destroys relationships. It destroys clarity. It destroys your capacity to respond to reality instead of reacting to your own projections. Every day, you encounter people who frustrate you, who irritate you, who seem to embody everything you despise. And your immediate instinct is to blame them, to label them, to create distance. But Jung would ask you a different question. What are you seeing in them that you have disowned in yourself? What quality, what behavior, what tendency are you refusing to acknowledge within your own psyche? This is not about excusing harmful behavior. It is about reclaiming psychological responsibility. It is about recognizing that your emotional reactions are information about your internal state, not objective assessments of external reality. Improving your awareness of projection means pausing before you react. It means asking yourself whether your intensity matches the situation, or whether something deeper is being triggered. It means noticing when you are consistently bothered by the same type of person, the same type of behavior, the same type of situation, and using that pattern as a doorway into your own shadow. This is uncomfortable work. It requires you to admit that you are not as self-aware as you believed, that you are not as objective as you pretended, that you have been participating in the very dynamics you claim to be above. But this discomfort is the beginning of transformation. Because when you stop projecting, when you start owning your shadow, you stop giving your power away. You stop being controlled by unconscious triggers. You stop wasting energy on blame and judgment and start using that energy for integration. And as you integrate, as you retrieve the parts of yourself you have been projecting onto others, you become whole. You become capable of seeing people as they actually are instead of as symbols of your unresolved material. The third thing you must improve daily is your capacity for solitude. Not loneliness, not isolation, but the ability to be alone without feeling abandoned by yourself. Jung understood that most people are so identified with their social roles, with their relationships, with their external achievements, that they have no idea who they are when no one is watching. They have never developed an internal relationship. They have never learned to find companionship within their own psyche, and so they remain dependent. They remain desperate for validation, for attention, for proof that they exist through the eyes of others. This dependency is a prison. It makes you manipulable. It makes you willing to betray yourself to maintain connection. It makes you perform instead of exist. And the only way out is to build a daily practice of solitude where you learn that you are enough, that your presence does not require an audience, that you can be with yourself without needing to be entertained or distracted or soothed by external forces. Improving your capacity for solitude means setting aside time every day where you are alone, not scrolling, not consuming, not performing, but simply being. You might walk, you might sit, you might write, but the activity is secondary. What matters is that you are cultivating the experience of being complete without external input. You are learning that solitude is not a punishment. It is a sanctuary. It is where you remember who you are beneath the roles you play. And as you strengthen this capacity, something shifts in all your relationships. You stop clinging. You stop seeking completion in others. You stop projecting your unmet needs onto people who were never meant to carry them. You become capable of genuine intimacy because you are no longer using others to fill the void where your self-relationship should be. You become someone who can be alone without being lonely and connected without being dependent. The fourth thing you must improve daily is your relationship to responsibility. Not obligation, not duty, but the recognition that your life is your own creation and that blaming circumstances or other people for your condition is a form of psychological suicide. Jung believed that the moment you accept full responsibility for your experience, you reclaim your power. Because if you created this, consciously or unconsciously, you can also change it. But if you remain in the position of victim, if you keep insisting that your suffering is caused by forces outside your control, you guarantee your own helplessness. Most people resist this. They prefer the comfort of blame because blame protects the ego. It allows you to avoid the painful truth that you have been complicit in your own suffering, that you have been choosing, day after day, to avoid the work of integration, that you have been prioritizing comfort over growth, familiarity over transformation, the maintenance of your persona over the development of your authentic self. This is not about self-judgment. It is about self-honesty. It is about recognizing that you are not powerless, you are just unwilling to face what change actually requires. Improving your relationship to responsibility means asking yourself every day, where am I avoiding ownership? Where am I blaming others for my internal state? Where am I pretending to be helpless when I am actually just afraid? This is brutal work. It strips away the narratives you have been using to protect yourself from your own agency. But it is also liberating. Because once you stop blaming, once you start owning, you discover that you have more power than you ever imagined. Not power over others, but power over your own response. Power over your own attention, power over your own choices, and this changes everything. You stop waiting for permission. You stop waiting for the right conditions. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you from yourself. You simply begin, you take the next step, you make the next choice, you integrate the next shadow fragment. And slowly, through the accumulation of these daily acts of responsibility, you become someone who creates their life instead of someone who reacts to it. The fifth thing you must improve daily is your honesty with yourself. Not brutal self-criticism, not perfectionism, but the capacity to see yourself clearly without the distortion of ego defense, without the need to be right, without the compulsion to maintain an image that does not match your reality. Jung taught that self-deception is the greatest obstacle to individuation. When you lie to yourself about who you are, about what you want, about what you are actually doing with your life, you create a split. You create a gap between your conscious identity and your unconscious truth. And that gap becomes the source of all your suffering. You tell yourself you want one thing while your behavior reveals you want something else. You claim to value integrity while you compromise yourself daily for approval. You insist you are working toward transformation while you avoid every opportunity for real change. This is not hypocrisy. It is unconsciousness. It is the ego protecting itself from the discomfort of truth. But the cost is your wholeness. The cost is your authenticity. The cost is your life. Improving your honesty with yourself means creating a daily practice of self-examination where you ask the questions you have been avoiding. What am I pretending not to know? What am I doing that contradicts what I claim to value? Where am I performing transformation instead of actually transforming? These questions are uncomfortable because they expose the gap between your image and your reality. But that exposure is necessary, because you cannot integrate what you refuse to see. You cannot change what you will not acknowledge. This is not about shame. It is about clarity. It is about developing the psychological strength to look at yourself without needing to be perfect, without needing to be acceptable, without needing to maintain the illusion that you have it all figured out. You learn that honesty is not cruelty. It is respect. It is the foundation of all real change. Because when you stop lying to yourself, when you stop defending your ego at the expense of your growth, you create space for something new to emerge. These 5 areas are not separate. They are interconnected territories of the same psychological landscape. Your relationship to silence affects your awareness of projection. Your capacity for solitude strengthens your sense of responsibility. Your honesty with yourself deepens all the others. And when you attend to these areas daily, when you make them the focus of your inner work, transformation stops being something you hope for and becomes something you enact. Jung understood that individuation is not a destination. It is a process. It is the daily practice of becoming more conscious, more integrated, more whole. And it happens not through grand gestures or dramatic breakthroughs, but through small, consistent acts of psychological courage, through choosing silence over distraction, through noticing projection instead of acting on it, through embracing solitude instead of fleeing it, through accepting responsibility instead of deflecting it, through speaking truth to yourself instead of hiding from it. This is the work. This is what transforms your life, not the addition of new routines, but the transformation of your relationship to yourself. Not the achievement of external goals, but the integration of internal fragments. Not the construction of a better persona, but the dissolution of the need to perform at all. You have been waiting for the right moment, the right conditions, the right level of motivation. But transformation does not wait for readiness. It begins when you stop avoiding what you already know, when you stop pretending that your suffering is mysterious, when you stop outsourcing your authority to experts, to systems, to anyone other than the psyche you carry within you. Every day, you have the opportunity to attend to these 5 areas, to sit in silence, to notice your projections, to strengthen your capacity for solitude, to accept responsibility, to practice honesty. And every day you choose to do this work, you move closer to the person you actually are beneath the person you have been performing. You move closer to wholeness. You move closer to the life that is waiting for you on the other side of your willingness to change.